After my grandfather passed, my uncle told everyone he left everything to me. The rest of you get nothing. I looked around at my devastated family, then stood up. That's strange, because he gave me a safe deposit box key before he died. My uncle's face twisted in panic as I reached into my pocket. My grandfather, James Whitaker, was a tough, no-nonsense man who built his life from the ground up. He grew up poor in Boston, Massachusetts, but through sheer determination, he started his own construction business and turned it into something successful. He wasn't filthy rich, but he was comfortable. He had 3 children: my mom, Sarah, my aunt, Rachel, and my uncle, Frank. Growing up, my grandfather was fair. He treated all his kids with equal love, but Frank was always different. He was the golden child in his own mind, convinced he was better than everyone. Even though Grandpa tried to keep things fair, Frank was the type to take and never give back. Frank was always the one borrowing money and making empty promises to pay it back. He drove fancy cars, but never had a real job. If he visited Grandpa, it was for one reason: money. When Grandpa got sick, my mom and aunt were there for him every single day. They took him to doctor's appointments, managed his medications, cooked his meals. Frank? He showed up twice. Once to check in, and another time to ask for a loan. Then, Grandpa passed away. We were all grieving. My mom and aunt were devastated. They had lost their dad. But Frank? He was too busy making phone calls at the funeral, like he had some big plans. It wasn't long before we found out why. The lawyer's office was quiet. My mom, my aunt, and I sat together, still in mourning. Frank walked in 10 minutes late, wearing a new suit and looking like he had just won the lottery. He greeted no one. Just sat down with a smug look on his face. The lawyer, a no-nonsense guy named Mr. Adler, cleared his throat and started reading. James Whitaker's estate, assets, and financial holdings will be inherited in full by Frank Whitaker. The rest of the family will receive no financial assets. My mom gasped. My aunt's eyes filled with tears. I just sat there stunned. Frank leaned back in his chair, smiling. Dad knew I was the only one who could handle things properly, he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. My mom shook her head. That doesn't make sense, she whispered. That's not what he would have wanted. Frank sighed dramatically. Look, I know this is hard for you guys, but Dad made his decision. He wanted someone responsible to handle things. Responsible? Frank had been in gambling debt for years. He owed money to multiple people. And suddenly, our grandfather thought he was trustworthy enough to control everything? I wasn't buying it. And then I remembered something. A few days before Grandpa passed, he called me into his room. His voice was weak, but his mind was sharp as ever. Listen, kid, he said, gripping my hand. I don't trust Frank. I need you to look after your mom and Rachel. I nodded, confused. Go to the Cambridge Bank. Box 317. He reached under his pillow and handed me a small key. Do it after I'm gone. Don't tell anyone. At the time, I thought maybe it was sentimental. Maybe old documents, personal letters. But now? Now, I had a bad feeling. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the safe deposit box key, holding it up so everyone could see. Frank's smug look disappeared. His face twitched. That's weird, I said, keeping my voice steady. Because Grandpa gave me this key before he died. Mom and Rachel stared at me. Mr. Adler sat up a little straighter. Frank? He looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. That's nothing, he said quickly. Probably just old junk. Then why do you look so nervous? I asked. He had no response. Mr. Adler adjusted his glasses. A safe deposit box? That wasn't listed in the estate records. Frank shifted in his seat, his face getting redder by the second. I mean, it's probably just look, there's no need to make this complicated. Oh, but there was. Mr. Adler frowned. Actually, we do need to check. I stood up. Let's go to the bank. The next morning, my mom, aunt, and I arrived at the Cambridge Bank with Mr. Adler. Frank showed up, visibly sweating. He tried to play it cool, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The bank clerk led us to the vault. I slid the key into the lock, took a deep breath, and pulled the box open. Inside, there were several stacks of documents, a handwritten letter, and a USB drive. My hands trembled as I picked up the letter. I recognized the handwriting immediately, Grandpa's. I read it out loud. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And if Frank is throwing a fit, then I was right. I always knew he would try to take everything. But the truth is, I left my assets to be split fairly. The real will is inside this box. The one Frank has? A fake. A stunned silence filled the room. Frank let out a nervous laugh. That's ridiculous. That letter could be fake. Mr. Adler ignored him and reached for the real will. It was properly notarized and signed. The estate was split evenly, Frank got nothing. Then, I picked up the USB drive. Frank tried to snatch it, but I yanked my hand away. The bank clerk looked alarmed. Sir, please step back. Mr. Adler plugged the USB into his laptop. A video file appeared. I clicked play. A security camera recording popped up. It showed Frank, sitting in a dimly lit office. Across from him, a shady-looking lawyer. Their voices were clear as day. Frank, can you fake a will? Lawyer, for the right price. Frank, I need it done before the old man dies. Frank froze. His face turned white. The video played in stunned silence. Frank sat there, looking like he had seen a ghost. His hands clenched into fists, his face drained of all color. The bank vault felt smaller, hotter, like the air had been sucked out. My mother covered her mouth. My aunt shook her head in shock. The video continued. Frank, I need it done before the old man dies. Shady lawyer, that's risky. If the real will turns up, you're screwed. Frank, it won't. I've got it handled. The video ended. Silence. I turned to Frank. Handled, huh? He shot up from his chair. This is bullshit. Watch your language, Mr. Adler said calmly, closing the laptop. Frank turned to the bank clerk. This is a setup. This whole thing is fake. The bank clerk didn't even flinch. Sir, we don't interfere in legal matters. But you should leave before we call security. Frank's jaw clenched. He turned to us, desperate. Look, let's be reasonable, like how you reasonably tried to steal everything. I cut in. His face twitched. We can fix this. His voice was lower now. Let's just work something out. He was negotiating. He was actually trying to bargain his way out. My mother stood up. Her voice was steady, but I could see the rage beneath it. You let us believe Dad cut us out. You let us sit there and cry while you smiled in our faces. Frank swallowed hard. I was just what? My aunt snapped. Lying? Stealing? Frank's fake charm crumbled. His eyes darted to me. You can just hand that over, right? He nodded toward the USB drive in my hand. I let out a dry laugh. Oh, you mean evidence? You want me to hand you the proof of your crime? Frank's face darkened. You don't know what you're doing. His voice dropped. You have no idea what you're messing with. My stomach twisted. There was something off about his tone. Is that a threat? Mr. Adler asked, raising an eyebrow. Frank exhaled sharply, rubbing his hands over his face. He looked cornered, and desperate men do stupid things. Fine, he muttered. Then he stormed out of the bank. But something told me this wasn't over. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced. If Frank had been confident enough to forge a will, then he must have had a backup plan. The next morning, I woke up to a call from my mom. We need to go to Grandpa's house. Now. There was something in her voice, something that made my stomach drop. When we got to Grandpa's house in Cambridge, the front door was unlocked. That was impossible. The place had been empty since Grandpa passed. We hadn't even started sorting through his things. I exchanged a look with my mother before stepping inside. The air was stale, filled with dust and the faint smell of my grandfather's old cologne. But something was wrong. Drawers were open. Papers were scattered across the floor. The desk in his study had been ransacked. Someone had been looking for something. And I had a good idea who. Frank was here, my aunt whispered. I knelt beside the mess. Letters, receipts, old bills. He had been digging through everything, looking for something that could help him cover his tracks. And then I saw it. A shredder sat near the desk, half filled with torn-up documents. That bastard was trying to destroy evidence. My hands shook as I pulled out pieces of paper. Some were completely shredded, but a few were still readable. One had my grandfather's handwriting. Frank can't be trusted. I need to make sure my estate is handled properly. I left a copy of my will in, it cut off there. The rest was gone. There's another copy, my mother whispered. He just told us where. Frank hadn't found it yet. We had to move fast. Where would he hide something like that? My aunt asked. My mom's eyes widened. His office. Downtown. He always kept backup files in a locked cabinet. We drove there immediately. When we arrived, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Frank's car was already parked out front. He was inside. We weren't just looking for the will anymore. We were about to come face to face with a man who had nothing left to lose. Frank's car was already parked outside Grandpa's old office. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. This was something worse. My mom gripped my arm. What do we do? I didn't have an answer. We could call the police, but for what? Trespassing? We didn't even know what he was doing in there yet. We go in, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Before he finds whatever he's looking for. My mom and aunt hesitated, but I pushed open the door. The office was silent, the air heavy with dust. The old fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Grandpa's desk sat in the middle of the room, still covered with neatly stacked papers. But the filing cabinet? It was already open. And Frank was inside the storage closet, rummaging through a set of old boxes. He hadn't noticed us yet. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I asked. Frank spun around so fast he knocked over a box. Papers spilled onto the floor. His eyes were wild, his face pale. He looked like a man on the edge. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed. "Neither should you," my aunt snapped. "Unless you're here to return the documents you shredded." Frank clenched his jaw, stepping closer. His voice was low, dangerous. "You don't understand. This isn't just about the money anymore." That sent a chill down my spine. My mom stiffened. "Then what is this about, Frank?" His eyes darted toward the papers scattered on the floor, documents he had been digging through. I took a step forward, bending down before he could stop me. My hands landed on an old envelope, its edges yellowed with age. My grandpa's signature was scrawled across the front. I opened it. Inside was a second letter, written in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. "If you found this, then I was right. I never told anyone, but I've been keeping a secret for years. This isn't about my business or my estate. This is about what Frank did in 1998. My heart stopped. I looked up at Frank. His entire body went rigid. "Put that down," he said, his voice shaky. I ignored him and kept reading. I covered for him because he was my son. I regret it now. I should have let him face the consequences. Frank knows what he did. And if he's trying to destroy this letter, then he knows it's finally caught up with him. I looked up again. "What happened in 1998? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Frank's breathing was uneven. His eyes flicked toward the door, like he was about to bolt. I didn't let him. "What happened in 1998, Frank?" I shouted. He snapped. "IT was a mistake." My mother flinched. My aunt grabbed my arm. Frank's chest rose and fell rapidly. He looked like a man cornered by his past. "I didn't mean to do it," he whispered. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." He ran a hand through his hair, laughing bitterly. "Dad promised me he'd never tell anyone. He told me it was handled." I didn't blink. Handled what? Frank's entire body sagged. Like the weight of the truth was about to crush him. "There was an accident," he muttered. My stomach twisted. "What kind of accident?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned his back on me, gripping the desk like he needed it to stay upright. "I didn't mean to kill him." Silence. Everything in the room changed. My mother let out a strangled gasp. My aunt took a step back, covering her mouth. Frank turned around, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. "You don't understand," he whispered. "I was just trying to scare him." I felt lightheaded. "Who?" I forced the word out. Frank swallowed hard. His voice was barely audible. "The guy I owed money to." It started years ago, when Frank was in deep with a loan shark. The details were hazy, but the letter in my hands filled in the blanks. Grandpa had known everything. Frank had owed someone a lot of money. And when he couldn't pay, the guy came looking for him. One night, Frank decided to confront him. But things got out of hand. "I just wanted to scare him," Frank muttered, his voice shaking. "I swear to God, I didn't mean for him to fall." "Fall?" My mouth went dry. "Fall where, Frank?" He rubbed his face, laughing weakly. "Off a damn bridge." The story spilled out like a confession years in the making. Frank had pushed the guy too hard. He fell, hit his head, and drowned before anyone could help. The police never solved it. They thought it was an accident. But Grandpa knew the truth. He had covered for Frank, using his connections to make sure the case went cold. And now Frank thought he could erase the last piece of evidence. I looked down at the letter again. The last lines made my blood run cold. "If anything happens to me, Frank is the first person you should look at. He's done it before. And if he's desperate enough, he'll do it again." My hands shook as I folded the letter back into the envelope. Frank took a step forward. "You can't show that to anyone," he said, his voice eerily calm. I took a step back. My mother and aunt stood frozen, the weight of the truth pressing down on them. "You don't get it," Frank continued. "I have nothing left to lose." His hand darted toward his jacket pocket. I didn't think. I lunged forward. "No," my mom screamed. Frank shoved me aside, ripping the letter from my hands. I hit the ground hard, pain exploding through my side. "Frank, stop," my aunt shouted. But it was too late. Frank grabbed a lighter from his pocket, and before any of us could stop him, he set the letter on fire. The flames spread fast, the paper curling and blackening within seconds. I scrambled forward, trying to grab it, but it was already too late. The last piece of Grandpa's evidence was turning to ash. Frank stood there, breathing heavily, watching it burn. Then he looked at me, smiling slightly, like he had won. "Now it's your word against mine." Frank stood there, watching the letter turn to ash. The smug look on his face made my blood boil. "Now it's your word against mine." For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound in the office was the faint crackling of burning paper. I felt sick. I had been so close to proving everything, to exposing him once and for all. And now? Now, the last piece of evidence was gone. My mother and aunt stood frozen, horrified. Frank let out a breath, rubbing his hands together like this was just another problem solved. Well, he said, stretching his arms. I think that settles it. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. You really think you won? I said. Frank smirked. I don't think. I know. My fists clenched. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to wipe that arrogant look off his face. But then I remembered something. My hands were shaking, but I reached into my pocket. Frank's smug look faltered as I pulled out my phone and turned the screen toward him. The video had been recording the entire time. Frank stopped breathing. I pressed play. His own words filled the room. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted to scare him. I didn't mean for him to fall off the bridge. His confession. Recorded. Frank's face turned gray. You son of a... He lunged at me. I barely had time to react before he grabbed my wrist, trying to rip the phone away. Crash. We slammed into Grandpa's desk, knocking over a stack of books. Give it to me, he snarled. Get the hell off me, I shouted, shoving him back. My mother and aunt screamed as Frank grabbed a paperweight off the desk and swung it at me. I ducked just in time. It smashed against the filing cabinet, leaving a dent. Are you insane? My aunt shrieked. Frank's chest was heaving, his eyes wild. He had completely lost control. I turned and bolted for the door, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. But Frank wasn't done. He grabbed a chair and flung it in my direction. I dodged just in time, but my foot caught on a stray book and I went down hard. Frank pounced. You're not ruining this for me. I twisted onto my back, holding up my phone just out of his reach. Bang. The office door slammed open, and suddenly, 2 uniformed police officers burst in. Get on the ground. Hands where we can see them. Frank froze. His eyes darted to the door, to his only escape. But it was too late. The cops rushed forward, tackling him to the ground before he could make a run for it. No, you don't understand, he screamed, thrashing like a wild animal. The officers pinned him down. One of them pulled out handcuffs. My mother had her hands over her mouth, tears running down her face. My aunt was shaking, gripping the edge of the desk like she was about to collapse. I finally sucked in a breath, my entire body trembling. Someone want to tell me what the hell is going on here? One of the cops asked. I held up my phone, still recording. I have everything you need. The next few hours were a blur. We gave our statements. I handed over the video recording. The cops retrieved the half-burnt scraps of Grandpa's letter, just in case anything could still be pieced together. Frank? Frank was taken out of the office in handcuffs, screaming like a lunatic. You set me up. This is a lie. You'll never prove it. But we already had. The moment the police watched the video, they knew. Frank was done. Frank was charged with multiple crimes. Forgery and fraud, for faking the will, destruction of evidence, for burning the letter, assault and battery, for attacking me, and most importantly, his past finally caught up with him. The cold case from 1998 was reopened. When the cops started digging, they found more proof of what Frank had done all those years ago. And just like that, my uncle was facing a murder charge. 2 weeks later, the court officially dismissed Frank's fake will. The real one was validated, and my mom and aunt finally got their fair share of Grandpa's estate. It wasn't about the money. It was about justice. Frank tried to take everything from us. Instead, he lost everything himself. Before Frank's trial, I went to see him one last time. He was sitting in a jail cell, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. No fancy suit. No smug smile. Just a broken man in an orange jumpsuit. He looked up when I stepped in. You happy now? He muttered. I stared at him. This man, this pathetic, selfish man, had tried to ruin my family. He had lied, cheated, and even killed a man just to save himself. And now? Now, he was the one with nothing left. You did this to yourself, I said. Frank scoffed, leaning back in his chair. Dad would have protected me. I felt my chest tighten, but I stayed calm. Dad isn't here anymore, I said. And he left me the key for a reason. Frank's face twisted with rage. But I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked away. I never saw him again. Sometimes, justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure the truth wins. Frank thought he was untouchable. He thought he could lie, steal, and get away with murder. But in the end, he lost everything. And my grandfather? He made sure his real legacy was protected.